Well, we are going to go through and breeze very quickly through the history of our program, just so that you understand what the selection process looks like from a bird's eye view. We'll dig a little bit more specifically into the request for qualifications, just in case you haven't read through it. And if necessary, we can cover some of the tips and tricks to applying through call for entry. There are some things that we usually recommend to artists if you haven't applied, or maybe you've applied many times, but there are some back end things that we can help you with if you need to make edits. So we'll just cover that. But just to kick us off, the Denver Public Art Program has been around for many years. Specifically, it was established by Mayor Federico Pena through an executive order and then enacted into law by City Council in 1991. The program itself is very similar to many 1% projects or programs across the country, where we sent 1% of the budgeted construction cost on new capital improvement projects with budgets equal to or more than $1 million. We have probably over 500 artworks in our Denver Public Art collection at this point, and this includes some of the donated and historic pieces that we own as well. Each project that we take on is site-specific and unique, meaning it is created in response to the place and the community in which it resides. The goal for each project is to have the artwork speak to its users, perhaps interpreting the history of the place or its people, or addressing a social or environmental issue. All artwork should enhance the site and the user's experience of the site. And all projects, no matter where they're located or size of the budget, go through the same process, which we ensure is open, fair, and transparent. We also are really intentional about including community members and non-arts professionals on our panels. It just helps us create a more balanced, voice group, or at least shifts the idea of what expertise means. So we just feel that community representation is just as important as arts professionals in this field. And we go into depth with our selection panels to talk about aesthetic bias and preference, pointing out that even if a particular work might not strike or be aesthetically pleasing for each panelist, we do want to make sure that it speaks to the site and the goals that they've outlined. If you joined us on pre-application meetings in the past, we like to spend a little bit of time talking about how our selection process works. It's definitely thorough and lengthy, but we just want to make sure that we're, giving our selection panel and you all as applicants and potential finalists as much information as you need, so that, your expectations are managed on a certain level. But really the first step for us is to create the selection panel. The panel consists of members who live and work in the community, artists, arts professionals, and civic leaders, the Public Art Committee members, and the Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs. We follow this composition for each and every project we take on. And then once the panel is finalized, it's ultimately approved by the Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs. Once that panel is approved, members meet to cover all the information they need to successfully navigate the project and process. And this includes establishing some goals and criteria for the request for qualifications or call to artists. Themes and goals that you see for the 5280 Trail project were determined by the panel. And once they do have those goals, our team or myself will help in drafting that RFQ document. The panel reviews and gives feedback, and then it makes our way over to the marketing team, where we make the call open for about 4 weeks, which is essentially where we are right now. Once that application period closes for us on June 15th, the panel will look through all applications individually to submit their scores. And then we will reconvene as a group to narrow the pool down to approximately 3 to 5 finalists. And then we invite those finalists to create site-specific proposals. And during proposal development, we hold a few critical meetings, including a community meeting with the selection panel members, technical meeting with the design team. So you'll get a lot more in-depth information on, what is happening in that space. We are anticipating hosting a site visit as well, so that folks who aren't familiar with this project really get a good sense of what's happening. And then again, it all comes together with our finalist presentations where you present your concept and proposal to the selection panel. I should note right now, I do not have a vote in this process. Nobody from the public art department does, but we are here to provide and facilitate the overall sequence of events. And that includes making sure that you all feel supported, both as you're submitting your applications in this first phase, but also as finalists. Oh, and I'm just gonna let one more person in here from the waiting room. Okay, all right. I'm moving right along here. Generally speaking, anything that anyone can buy off the shelves is not considered to be public art for our program. This includes wayfinding or advertising signage, reproductions of original artworks, or mass-produced objects like bike racks or benches, except for where the elements are designed by the artist and a major part of the artwork. So projects that are considered eco art, land art, environmental art, work that can border both landscape architecture and artwork. And if anybody is familiar with Donald Lipsky's piece in the web building, if you're based here in Denver, you've probably seen like a lot of mass-produced objects in his work, but because Donald Lipsky is an artist, and he's, combining found objects with an overall design. Obviously, that is going to be something we consider to be artwork. But just to give you a sense on how we talk about that with the selection panel, you can take a look at the example here on the screen. The wayfinding sign on 14th Street, which in itself is not public art, but the artwork attached to it, part of a series called the 14th Street Overlay is. And just to expand a little bit more, our program seeks to create new public artwork in collaboration with this selection panel. So artworks that are currently for sale or artworks that you think you might want to donate, we have an entirely separate program and process, and I'm happy to connect with you on that at another time. And I won't belabor this too much because I think you all are pretty familiar what we do consider to be public art, or how you're interpreting it. So lots of different things that we can take on, just highly specific depending on the project. All right, so we'll touch base a little bit on the RFQ requirements just so that we're all on the same page. We just like to go through some of these things one by one so that you're not missing anything, and making sure that you're not yet submitting fully realized concepts. At this point, we're only looking for previous work instead of early concepts. I think you all, again, are pretty familiar with how critical images are as part of this initial application. Each panelist is going to look over your entire application in detail, but the first item panelists will see are your images. So just make sure you're not only adding the required number of images, but consider the quality as well. You do want to make sure that the sizes are appropriate and the lighting is good and folks can see what's happening within your samples. These do not need to be of previous public art commissions. Anything that you feel would speak to the goals of the request for qualifications would be something important to include. So that means even two-dimensional examples are totally okay. So again, just to show you what we're hoping or looking for, the image shows some interactive quality, but it's a little bit difficult to tell what's going on there. The depth of field and the plants in the frame aren't totally helping the panel to see the work. But if you were to use an image similar to this, what I would recommend is that you also submit a close-up or a detail of the artwork as a companion image. The image on the right is typically what we're, or closer to what we're looking for. And something just to be wary here, again, I'm sure you're all very familiar with making sure that elements or the metadata attached to some of your call for entry applications, like your descriptions underneath your images, are filled out. So just make sure you're taking advantage of every area that you can. And if you've been a collaborator on certain projects, just make sure that you're highlighting some of the team members that you've worked with to accomplish some of these projects. We have some collaborative teams here in Denver, and some of the time, panelists are pretty familiar with one of the artists of that team. So you just want to make sure that you're minimizing any potential misunderstandings, that if you worked as part of a team, you're not claiming the work as solely your own. So yeah, and just be mindful about citing as many collaborators as you can. Again, resume section, pretty self-explanatory. Simply upload a copy of your resume no more than 2 pages long for an individual artist. And if you are an artist team, submit 1 page per team member only. Give me a second. I'm just going to check our waiting room. Okay, great. Okay, and for your statement of interest, again, including in your 2,000 character statement, making sure that you're addressing some of the information the panel wishes to know, and you can kind of see how we're guiding you in crafting that statement here. A few things when it comes to Cafe: if you are copying and pasting directly from Microsoft Word, you might be copying hidden characters into Cafe, which can cause some cutoff in your statement. So we just recommend that before you paste into Cafe, you paste it into a neutral program like Notepad or something that strips all of your style, so that any hidden characters are visible, that you can just simply delete them. Proofread your statements. We do have many calls in the city, and it's pretty common to see artists applying for several at the same time. And we see folks copying and pasting the same text for each call and not changing project names, which can be a little concerning for the panelists, especially for community representatives who are really invested in their neighborhoods. And if you're responding to a call that's making a specific request, just use this space to address how you want to fulfill that. So in some cases, the selection panel might be looking for a muralist who's interested in moving in a more sculptural direction. In this case, you'll just want to share with the selection panel how you plan to use this opportunity to do that, and potentially listing some of the collaborators that you're hoping to work with. Okay. Any questions about all of that front end information? I try to get through that a little bit quicker because I know you all want to get to the real part of the conversation. Okay, we got no question, thanks. Okay. Well, if you do, don't be afraid to unmute here. Happy to answer any questions that you have. So, okay. Now we're going to shift over to the project itself. So Acoma, pronounced Acoma, and for any of our Denverites or Coloradans here, might be used to calling it Acoma, but we've been really specific as a city to make sure that we're pronouncing the original indigenous name for the area. So that's why we have been pronouncing it like that. But this segment in particular is part of a project situated in the Golden Triangle neighborhood. And just before we share more information, just want to name that there are probably several of you on the call that know the history of this neighborhood far better and more deeply than we do. So what you'll see next is a very truncated offering, but its purpose is not really to summarize the neighborhood, just to acknowledge some of the layers that exist there. So again, very brief timeline touching on development policy, community organizing, and cultural continuity. And a lot of these pictures are, both from my personal archive as a nearby neighbor myself. You might be able to see some images, both of the historic Evans School, Curious Theater, the Spot Climbing Gym, some of our local businesses here, including 11 Deli. We have the Organic Salon on 11th Street, and then of course our Chalk Festival that happens every year. So the space is really active already, but this particular project is supported by RISE bond dollars that were deeply informed by the Golden Triangle Master Plan, the 5280 Trail Vision Plan and guidelines to build dedicated pathways for bicyclists, pedestrians, and non-car users, community gathering spaces and activity areas, and new lighting. And of course, connecting between neighborhood and museum and civic spaces. Some other things to note, and I'm going to paste a few more links here. The larger 5280 trail is a massive vision that connects cultural institutions, Denver neighborhoods, to create a really amazing civic experience. This is going to be an urban trail loop, ultimately connecting several different neighborhoods with a 5.280 mile trail, 5280, of course, being significant to us, being at Mile High. So some links for you here in the chat, both to the 5280 trail through the Downtown Denver Partnership. We also have a story map and ArcGIS information, and then information directly connected to our partners at the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. So many years of planning, and our artwork is going to be an excellent element as part of that. The selection committee is currently leaving site selections open to artists to begin their conceptual development. Once finalists are selected, more information regarding the site will be provided. That said, sightlines and, this opportunity to beckon viewers into the Golden Triangle neighborhood is of high importance. And the goals and site and media material specifically is really meant to be immersive and draw visitors from the Denver Art Museum and Cultural District toward the Golden Triangle neighborhood. It's going to be really important to draw inspiration from the surrounding Golden Triangle neighborhood and celebrate the 5280 trail as a really vibrant but important public space. Making sure that the artwork is fulfilling or furthering placemaking goals of the 5280 trail. So looking at those resources that we dropped in the chat is going to be really helpful to you. We've also linked all of these resources and materials in the RFQ itself. So if you haven't had an opportunity, or you forget to copy and paste some of these things, this won't be the last opportunity you have to access them. But again, incorporating some interactive elements while being mindful of nearby businesses and residential areas will be important. So if you're having some ideas for sound pieces, many of you will see pretty quickly, because of so many residencies, but also small businesses, including Curious Theater. We just want to make sure that we're being mindful about some of those operations and activities. And of course, the 5280 trail is a bigger vision, and the Acoma trail, or the Acoma segment, is one of the inaugural projects to kick off that larger vision. So it is really important. We're really looking for folks who are excited to be part of that first step and first phase. And there will also be some deadlines that we need to meet for that. So just something to keep in mind as you apply and potentially as you are onboarded as a finalist. And of course, if you have already dug into the request for qualifications, you have probably already seen that we have a pre-scheduled next couple of phases. So again, just something to be mindful of. If there are dates that you're not able to accommodate, and if you do move forward as a finalist, you'll either have to reach out to me as soon as possible so we can try and troubleshoot how to accommodate your schedule, or more than likely you'll have to work this into your existing timeline. All right. And I know you had we'll pause here before we go further into the call for entry details, but are there any specific questions about the site that I could help tease you out? Jennifer, yes, correct. So finalists are provided honorariums, both for concept development and for travel to come to Denver. How many community meetings are expected? Great question. As part of the selection process, the only community meeting that you are expected to attend is with the community representatives on the selection panel. If you move forward as a finalist and community engagement is really important to you, that community engagement will likely happen when and after you receive the award, but also after you move through the contracting phase and enter into preliminary and final design. But Denver Public Art doesn't typically request or require additional community engagement unless the selection panel requests it specifically or if it's already part of your typical practice. Yeah, another really great question, Daniela. Right now, we're primarily looking for three-dimensional works. But that said, there are potential opportunities, maybe not so much for wall applications, but ground applications. Asphalt art has some complications, right, when it comes to long-term maintenance. But if mural work is your primary practice, what I would probably do is either think about application methods that are less on walls and more on ground surfaces. Or if you're a muralist that's interested in moving in a more sculptural direction, what I would do is just talk about that in your artist statement and take a look at the fabricators that we have here in Denver. There's quite more than I think some people think. Sure. The design team and that process. So at this point, the design team is primarily our DOTI counterparts within the city. They have access to construction drawings and design documents that we'll be able to share with you once you make it forward as a finalist. That working with the design team in the selection process, at least, we are able to schedule that meeting so that way, if you have any technical questions, we can troubleshoot them with the design team on the front end. If you are selected and are under contract, we can touch base with the design team as many times as you would like. We're happy to facilitate standing meetings is something I'm a huge fan of, so that way we can stay on track. But as many touch points as you need. Do you accept two-dimensional art in three-dimensional form? Hmm. Toby, can you unmute and share more about what you mean?
Hello. I was thinking, a mixed media work in a case, like, a frame like, the, three-dimensional from you can see on both ends.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way about thinking about this space. And I would say, yeah, go for it. As long as you're thinking about long-term maintenance, I think anything is possible at this point. When it comes to interactivity, are there any restrictions on light and or sound? As someone who goes to some EDM concerts on occasion, I don't think we're looking for like an intense like laser experience. But I think light activation is totally fine. What you would probably experience if you pitch something with light, depending on how you're containing it. So obviously we do have zoning requirements that we'll need to just be sensitive to, not just because of neighbors, but also because of our local species and bird populations and things like that. I think for sound, I think again, it's definitely a possibility. And we just have to be, well, we'd work together to make sure that you'd get what you wanted out of that kind of concept and proposal, while also being mindful to some of the local businesses in the area. I wish we could do lasers. That would be fun and very cool, but you know, we've got to temper it somewhere. Okay. Does the design team mention also constitute like engineering and structural questions, or is that separate? Yeah, again, good question. The design team that is working on this project might be able to help work through some structural engineering or site engineering questions. We're at a really interesting point in the parent project design process where if we wanted to integrate something into the overall site plan, I think there's some flexibility in being able to work with a general contractor on site to help with things like foundations, or footings or some things like that. Um, Part of your responsibility as a contracted artist is to procure structural engineering documents in final design. You do not have to procure that as part of a finalist uh, submittal, but once you're under contract, you are expected to produce Colorado stamps, Colorado engineered stamp drawings. Yeah, also a really great question. So, I think the selection panel is really open to interpretation. But I can share with you in the parent project where some of these gathering spaces are anticipated. This unfortunately, this rendering is a little outdated. There are some more updated drawings that we'll be able to share later. But for example, this is the Denver Art Museum down here. We have some wonderful museum public artworks here. Paula Castillo just installed a kind of like tunnel piece. If you're in Denver, or if and when you visit Denver, you should definitely check that out. So this is where that cultural district is, and leading into the more like residential areas. We have some call out spaces here. If I remember correctly, I think here is one here. There's one slightly in front of the schoolyard. We have, oh, yeah, oh, here, right. Sorry, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. So right in front of Acoma House, right over here, we have one right in front of Curious Theater and another slightly further down the street. I think those could be potential areas of activation. I think having multiple works could be an idea to take forward. but I think it really depends on your practice, and our budget overall is around 110,000. So I would err on the side of making sure that you're not creating too many artworks that they lose their, um, you know, if you're looking for like really strong impact. Maybe you can do that with smaller multiple pieces, but I think the budget is going to dictate that more than anything. Yeah, I think one would be okay. And I think you just have to go back to the goals too. What is going to really draw people in from the cultural district? But also thinking about like the 5280 trail as a larger vision. And let me see if I can go back to, so this is the full loop. Acoma as a first segment is this area down here, but it will end up connecting to a lot of other places in this site. So something to think about too. I think the selection panel, just to, for additional insight, I think one of the reasons why they are so open to a lot of different ideas is because this is such a new and vision for Denver. So we're really excited to see what you all have come up with. But of course, at this phase, we're still looking for your previous work.
I have a question, which I'm not sure if you've answered. Is there any infrastructure in the space for hanging things, like suspending things?
Good question. And also, hi, Will.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I think suspended things are interesting as an idea. I don't think it's off the table. I will say that again, budget dependent. If it is an overhead piece, what will probably happen is a commercial construction permit will be required to make sure that that structure follows building code and also any kind of fire code. So I don't think it's off the table. It's just something that you'll have to think carefully about.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I believe lower maintenance was desired. What is a reasonable expectation for that? Thinking in terms of like replacing lighting or an interactive computer parts for lighting. Yeah, that is a really great question, Eric. I think we have had a lot of really brilliant SoundWorks with computer components. Jim Green did a beautiful work here in Denver called Soundwalk, and it was installed in the early 90s. And just because of his genius as and some tech guru, that piece has not needed a lot of maintenance at all since it was first installed. And I think partially because it's motion sensor activated. And also the components are in a place where people really can't mess with it. So when it comes to lower maintenance of technology, what we would probably recommend is either you sharing information around what has really been successful and tested, maybe something that you've tried previously that you've seen has lasted really well or, withstood public installation. Or the alternative is to try to locate more commercial tech and equipment that if something needed replacing down the road, we'd be able to switch it out pretty easily. And this will definitely be a very well utilized space. If any of you have been in the area recently or has spent time in the area within the past couple of years, the neighborhood has really just changed a lot. And the opening or reopening of the historic Evans School and the schoolyard in particular, I mean, it is just super busy over there. So your works will be interacted with on some level. I would probably argue whether intentionally or not, but we probably want to lean on the more intentional side, just because that's what the selection panel is looking for. How graffiti or vandalism or climbing are concerned? How strong should everything be built? Well, we do require structural engineering for this specific reason, right? Climbing is, I mean, we just won't be able to avoid it, right? It's in public space. People are going to climb it. And having a stint in Philly during many World Series, we can put any kind of material on it that we'd like, and people are still going to find a way. So having, really having those Colorado stance engineered drawings are really critical. And graffiti and vandalism, I think that's, again, something that is probably going to be unavoidable, but we can help recommend paint systems and coatings that will help if we ever need to remove any of those things. And I would say, right, we don't have a cutoff for, some programs have stipulations in their policies that work should last for 50 years or, longer than that. And currently, we don't have any timeline. So once the work is installed in public space, we're meant to take care of it for a very, very long time. Okay. They're all really excellent questions. Before we move into any other project specific questions, I just want to make sure that we touch base on cafe. I think I'm going to guess that a few of you are pretty familiar with call for entry already. But something that I do want to make sure to point out, because not everybody is familiar with how they can edit applications after they've already submitted them. So let me just pull up my side of things. I always like to test our applications with submitting one of my own. But something that you can do if you've already submitted an application and you go back, you're looking through things and you're like, oh man, I was not thinking, I was just having a bad day, and I just was not paying attention to some of the proofreading that I needed to do. It really isn't the end of the world. What you would just need to do, find my email, email me directly, let me know that you want to make some edits. And basically what I'll do is change your status on my end to incomplete. And when that happens, you're able to go back and make those edits that you need to make and just resubmit them. So you can kind of see, these are all archived, but basically what you'll see is just a button that changes from received to incomplete. And it'll allow you the option to go back and make those edits and resubmit. The only thing that I will ask kindly is that you not wait for the day before to let me know that you need to make an edit, because we do have a deadline, and catching those things earlier is always preferred, just because we have a lot going on our end too. So happy to help. Just make sure you're not emailing me 5 minutes before the deadline closes, because I might not even be awake. Oh, goodness. Okay. Get back here. Any other questions for 5280 Trail at Acoma? I really hope that you all will take some time to really look into the resources that are available. You know, the Downtown Denver Partnership has done so much amazing work alongside the Golden Triangle Creative District. And the information they have to share is so extensive that we just aren't able to cover all the information in a 1 hour session with you. The story board or story map in particular will really take you through the entire story of the 5280 trail, how important and critical it is for artwork to be part of that overall vision. So I highly recommend it if you have time, because it could help inform some of your application materials, especially when it comes to your artist statement. And it'll also give you a lot more images on, you know, what the neighborhood looks like, in particular the Golden Triangle. And gives you great statistics too. Okay. And do you all have material preferences? Bronze, long lasting, classic? Yeah. Yeah, that balance is always really hard. I know bronze costs are continuing to just go up and up. Um, you know, I think stainless is always a preference. But with the right kind of engineering, I think we can make other metals work too. But I also think it comes down to the paint system and how we coat these things so that, you know, there's perhaps some rust inhibitor in some locations that might get more impacted. Like, you know, we have a sculpture and it's close to the ground. It's inevitable. Denver also has a very like 1-to-1 ratio of person to dog. So that's a reoccurring thing to think about. So maybe on something like your footers or something that's lower to the ground, you might think about a stainless. But I think we're open as long as you know. I think concrete reinforced fiberglass is also an option. I think we could just collaborate closely depending on what you're thinking about. Okay, well, we've got maybe 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any pressing questions, happy to answer. But if you need to just marinate on things a little bit too, we understand. You're always welcome to get in touch with us. My email is on the call, so feel free to follow up if you have any questions. Mm-hmm. Of course. Mm-hmm. The gray areas on the street are just part of the sidewalk. Oh, I see what you mean. Maybe here. Of course. Thank you all. Jennifer, I might ask you to unmute and just to clarify.
So you said in front of Curious Theater and in front of Acoma House and another one to the right of Curious Theater, that where those gray areas are potential sites for artwork. But they look like they go across the street, but they don't, right? They're just on the sidewalk. Is that true?
So I think one of these, most of these areas are going to be there will be a lot more design around them, so they won't just be gray. I think the intent is to bring color into the space through different, you know, oh my gosh, I can't really remember, but I think there are just brick types and different treatments that they're using to make sure that those community gathering spaces are identifiable.
Is there any seating in this pedestrian area?
Yep, there is expected seating in some of these areas.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, folks. Well, if we don't have any other questions, well, hold on a second. I don't want to miss anything. Thanks, Lonnie. I don't mind it. You know, we work with people all the time, so it's okay if we take a break too. Totally good. Eric, and maybe to make sure that we got you here. Elements of functionality desired, like a sculptural swing, bench. Yeah, I think that's possible. Again, just you got to keep in mind the budget. You know, anytime you have more interactive qualities, the more your costs are going to escalate just because of those like code compliance and, you know, safety elements. If you think of something, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to meet with you. And I also hold office hours on Monday afternoon. So if you also wanted to just catch up or, you know, schedule like a quick meeting with me, that's also okay. I'm happy to walk you through some, if anything is confusing about the request for qualifications, we can definitely tease it out together.